Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Corina Herrera Loera, Public Information Officer for the Emergency Operations here in Santa Clara County. Today we have a special guest, but before we bring her in and before I introduce her, I'm going to go ahead and start with our general update that we give on a biweekly in regards to our numbers and what that looks like in our county. Also today I want to give a shout out to Patricia Camarena, who's supporting making the magic work behind the scenes here and is going to be supporting with our presentation here today. Next slide, please. So now you will see this on our dashboards where our COVID daily updates were for those that were ages 12 and up. Now, as you all know, our children who are 5 and up will be able to get the vaccine. So the information changed. So as of November 17th, 73.9% of the residents of all ages with a completed vaccination. So that will be one of the changes that you'll see more recently on the updates of our COVID-19 dashboards. And our 7-day rolling average is 172. Next slide, please. And so here I'd like to update the fact that, some people say, well, why should I get my vaccine? What's the difference? Does it really make a difference? And so here you'll see that on this update of November 17th as well, those that were positive for COVID-19, 34% of those cases were unvaccinated and 6.4 were vaccinated. So what does this show? Yes, you can get COVID-19 even if you're vaccinated. However, in addition to the big difference in the numbers, the symptoms were also now not as severe for those who were fully vaccinated versus those that were unvaccinated. They had severe symptoms. Both had to quarantine. However, the breathing, the issues, the long-term effects, ending up in the ICU, ending up on the ventilator, and also the possibility of being death. We had a few deaths, and I know that specifically because one of my friends had to go to a funeral of a young father who unfortunately was unvaccinated, got COVID-19, and ended up also passing away. So COVID-19 still continues to be very real in our communities, and being vaccinated does protect you, not just from getting COVID-19, but also and mainly from having severe symptoms. Next slide, please. And so as we all know, everyone ages 5 and over are eligible now for a free COVID-19 vaccine in our county. And so just remember that your child will need 2 shots, before being fully covered. So the second shot is 3 weeks after the first shot. And your child will get the Pfizer vaccine. As of now, that is the only vaccine that is approved. And this is a vaccine that will be available for the children 5 to 11. It is a smaller dose, so it's only 1/3 of that of an adult size. So the children's vaccine will come in a smaller bottle. It's only 1/3 of the adult dose, but it will be twice, so 21 days apart. And I want to highlight that because we all know the holidays are here for some. Some of you will be gathering. The holiday break is coming up in December at the end. And so if you still have not gotten your child vaccinated, please get them vaccinated as soon as possible. Last year, we saw, though, 2 weeks after Thanksgiving or Thanksgiving, this is when the numbers went up. They started, coming back up, and then also that high surge after the Christmas break. And so we don't want to see the same thing happen again. And we want to make sure that everybody is protected. Next slide, please. And in regards to the booster, I know it's a little bit complicated. Some people are like, am I up for it or not? Can I get it? And so really now those who qualify are pretty much all those that are 18 and over that received their vaccine 6 months or more ago. And then in regards to, so if you received your vaccine 6 months ago or longer, you're up for a booster shot. So you're able to go get your booster shot. Some parents were asking if they can go to some of these children vaccine clinics at some of the schools to also receive their boosters, and they can. So if you take your child to get their vaccine, you can also get your booster shot there. Make sure, I know that the lines are long sometimes depending on where you go. So if you're one of those that, needs to be in and out in certain time, then feel free to go into scfreevax.org, make an appointment. And if you can go there and just wait in line, feel free. I know that the Santa Clara County Fairgrounds has a much larger setup, and they have a beautiful setup for the children too. So be a good opportunity to go and hang out with your children there and get your vaccines at the same time. Next slide, please. And so these are just numbers that I like to highlight. You never know when you might need them. The 211 is a general number you can call. Any questions regarding the COVID test, vaccines, and then the mental health services, our behavioral health center here for the county, 1-800-704-0900. Know your rights in the workplace, 1-866-870-7725. Substance use services, 1-800-488-9919. COVID support line, 408-808-7770. Crisis hotline, 24 hours, 7 days a week, 1-855-278-4204. Or you can also text renew to 741-741. And I always like to highlight, take these numbers down. You just never know when you might need them. And maybe not you, but a neighbor or a friend or a family member. And so you have these handy. Especially that crisis hotline, it's a tough time, as I mentioned, for many of us, especially those of us that are missing loved ones this year that might not be sitting at our dinner table. And so you just never know. It's always good to have these numbers to be able to access services and resources. Next slide, please. And in regards to the holidays are here, many of us have 2 days off. And so just as a county, wishing you all healthy holidays. Make sure to get vaccinated, stay home if you're sick, get tested before and after traveling or gathering, wear a good, well-fitting mask. Recommended the N95 or KN95 or the surgical masks. And then gather outside when able to, or increase the flow by opening windows. Always best to stay safe. And so that's to stay safe from COVID-19. But now, if we can bring in our wonderful guest speaker, Tamara Mosawani Alvarado. Welcome so much, Tamara. Tamara she does so many amazing things in our community, so I can go on and take the whole hour about just the things that she does. But here, I'm going to highlight the fact that she's a firekeeper for Calpulito Naleque. And if you don't know what that is, it's the Aztec dancing group. And she, along with other firekeepers, helps keep the community safe, spiritually, emotionally, and physically, but mainly spiritually, carrying her fire and connecting, in that way. And ensuring that, good energies are there, and that we're all feeling good and healthy as we're dancing in these ceremonies in particular. And I'm sure she'll talk a little bit more about her role there and what she does. And Tamara, thank you for accepting the invitation to come in and talk about health and wellness all around, and so I know that you do many things to keep yourself healthy and keep the community healthy. So thank you for coming on to sharing some of those things with our community today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to just hang out with you and hang out with the community. So aquí estoy, I'm here.
Nice.
Ready to talk.
Awesome. So I have some questions for you. And then I have a feeling that organically some stories and, more conversation might come up.
For sure.
But, I really want to take you back to growing up. Were you brought up with examples of taking care of, yourselves? Like if you think of your mom or grandmas, aunties, of taking care of themselves, was that something that you were exposed to at a young age?
Yes, absolutely. So growing up, my mom, who is from Tecolotlan, Jalisco, in Mexico, came from a very low income poverty. Came from poverty. So as you know, access to medicine and doctors wasn't 100% of the time available. So as you know, that's when you get to use our natural plants and those kinds of things. So I did grow up, for example, I grew up with a lot of yerba buena. This is some yerba buena. I think in English I know there's like peppermint or spearmint. It's not those, but it's yerba buena. It's cousins to those. So I did grow up with a lot of, oh, this hurts. Okay, let's boil up these herbs or this plant, or let's boil these two things together because that'll take care of that. So definitely grew up with that practice at home of using what you have and to grow your medicine. So yeah, that's something that for sure, Hilda, my mom, we absolutely always said, yes, let's also go to the doctor and those kinds of things. But I have a headache or I have cramps or I don't feel good, like the concept of susto, right? In our Mexicano community and in other communities, like when you're scared, something's happened, like maybe you were in a car accident and you survived and you've got like your spirit is kind of scared. There's different things that we learn to do. Anyways, that's a long answer to yes, I was raised that way.
I love it. Thank you so much. And just want to remind our audience here that feel free to put any questions, and we'll get some time
Yeah, absolutely.
to answer at the end. But I also want to take our community on a little journey.
Yeah.
Well, and not too far, but I think some people are like, well, what does this have to do with COVID-19, or
That's right.
how does this connect? And so, I mean, if it's no secret that we've all gone through a very dark time in our history or story, whatever you call it, right? I mean, and we're still there. Like, we haven't been in the clear, even though we're able to come out and maybe socialize a little bit more than we were a year ago.
Yeah.
We're still not in the clear. And we're, as I mentioned earlier, we're still losing family members, or community members. And so that alone, puts stress on our bodies.
Right.
And, also, not to mention now, I feel like after the pandemic, we're all living a much faster pace, like 5 Zooms, one after the next. And then you got to go and pick up your children from, school and do the homework and have dinner all at the same time. And then jump on the next Zoom because you got, Zooms till 10 at night now, and it's just much faster. And so that stress, after a while does impact you. So I want to ask you, what do you take time, like, I just think of your life and all the amazing things you do for work and, spiritually and all of the above as a mother and wife, and friend. What things do you do for yourself, or what, kinds of things does your family get involved with that are wellness, right now? Thank you for sharing about your mom. And I know that you make tecitos now still for your families, but
Sure
what
do.
other things do you all do? Do you do, individually, as a
Yeah.
family, collectively, as a community?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for asking that. And I did actually and it's been a stressful time. It has been a stressful time, and financially it's been a very stressful time, for a lot of people, to say like, hey, am I going to make the rent? Hey, is there going to be enough food? So I want to say thanks to all the places and spaces that created opportunities to help with the rent and help with food, and just reaching out to people and seeing it. I got a knock on my door one day from a county worker, um, asking me if I had access to food and if I had access to all these services. And I just was so grateful. So I was so grateful to the county for that. It was a good experience for me, that even though I didn't need in this time, I in that, this moment that this person knocked on my door, I just said, wow, that's something that maybe doesn't happen in other places. Anyway, so what we do, I'll tell you this. I'm doing this right now. Please note, we are in my kitchen. Please note, there is a stovetop. And in the stovetop, I've got some water boiling with some yerba buena that I plucked from my yard. So you might say, Tamara, I live in an apartment. I don't have a whole backyard where I can grow my own plants and vegetables and such. Very good. Here are some of the things about working with plants is that they don't necessarily cost a whole bunch of money. By the way, if you're hearing yelling, it's after school and my son is playing some games. So there you go. Everything's happening all at the same time. But back to the hierbas, what some of the things that we do as a family and individually is that yes, we make teas out of these hierbas. Like I said, we got to look up what hierba buena is directly in English, but let's just go with like it's not peppermint.
Mint. In the mint family.
In the mint family, yes. In the mint family is really good for cramps. Especially when you have, maybe you have children that are just starting their monthly periods and, cramping can really be hard. So that's always great. Or maybe you feel a little bit, just a little bit stressed. Manzanilla chamomile is really good and it's great to have it grown. But guess what? If you only have it in a tea package, that's fine. We're not going for, you've got to be hardcore and be completely 100% authentic chamomile flower pulled from the earth. That's okay. Or for example, rosemary grows all over. I'm going to try to get this into the camera. Well, I think that's about as close. Let me go this way. So I don't know if you can see against my hair, it has this little purple flower. And that little purple flower there is called, in Spanish, it's called lucema. I don't know what it is in English. Let's just call it a flower. And that little purple flower is often boiled for headaches. So, obviously we want to leave those little purple flowers for the bees that help pollinate all the plants. But that's something that I didn't know. And when I learned that, I thought, oh, that's really cool. Now I go to that. Like I feel a headache coming on. If I'm at home, I'll boil up some romero, some rosemary with some of that lucema, the little purple blossoms. And by the way, rosemary grows all over the place. You'll see it, in different places on, public spaces. And I'm sure it's okay to grab just a little bit, for home. So one thing to do is teas, right? If you can only have like little tea bags that you buy at the store, fine. But if you have a little bit of a yard, or maybe you can go to the store and you buy a little bit of yerba buena or a little bit of rosemary, it doesn't take a lot of money. It's like $2 to buy a little bunch. And it's a really great example of self-care, right? To say, okay, I know money might be tight. And maybe you have a neighbor that you can trade with and say, hey, maybe I can trade, like I've got a bunch of apples and can I get some of your yerba buena? You would be surprised how many people have all these different plants and herbs planted in their gardens and they want to give it away. So that's one thing. Another thing, if I can add, that we do for ourselves in our family and individually, I guess, is that we boil up a bunch of these yerba buena, rosemary, maybe ruda, which is rue in English. Hey, I know that one. R-U-E, rue, and others, and you boil up an herbal bath, right? And what that is that you boil water with the herbs and maybe a couple of drops of essential oils, like maybe your favorite, like, I don't know, vanilla or lavender, just 1 or 2 drops, boil it up. And if you have a bathtub, yay, you can pour that in there in your, hot bath and then just kind of sit with that and have that aromatherapy happen for you. And then the other thing you can do is if you just have like the shower, then at the end of your shower, get that little tub of warm, boiled up herbal bath and pour it over yourself. And it just feels so good. It feels like you're taking care of yourself. I know it might sound a little corny, but it's like a warm, that warm, good smelling finish. And then you just kind of towel off and you did something for you that wasn't just like, okay, I got to shower, and let me get out and, go on to the next thing. It only takes a few minutes. You can literally, boil some water with these plants, plant materials in it, bring it to a boil, let it sit, and then bring it next to your shower or to the bathtub and let it kind of settle down while you bathe. And then pour that over yourself. It doesn't cost a lot of money. Things like this are sold at the store. You get sold all kinds of things at the store that are actually things that you can make at home, which is I'm always looking for low cost ways. We have a large family, and so it's always great to have something that we can do that doesn't cost a lot and also follows our traditions. These are not things that we have made up. It's not some sort of like mumbo jumbo that we just pulled out of nowhere. I know my grandmother's grandmother's grandmother did these herbal baths, and we grew these same plants for, you know, these plants have been growing forever. So these traditions of herbal baths and teas and other practices that are 100%, natural and easy to do, they're great to, especially in these times. I think when we're very fatigued, with the pandemic. Although the pandemic is somewhat over, it's not necessarily over economically. Our children have gone back to school, and for a lot of our kids, that's been really difficult to adjust from being at home to being at school. Developmentally, it's been challenging.
Mhm.
If you were in the middle of fifth grade and all of a sudden you're in the middle of junior high, that's a big jump that happened during the pandemic. Anyways, so one last thing that I will say is that we've been doing a lot of walking. Walking is cheap. Walking is cheap. You don't need much, and you need a pair of shoes. And if you don't need a pair of shoes, well, then I salute your strong feet. And that's always something that I know. We have children, and sometimes we say, let's go for a walk. Their first response might be like, do we have to? But then we go out on a walk, and you know what? It's one way to disconnect from phones and tablets and television and just engage. And you might actually run into some of these plants while you're out on a walk, or maybe you're at one of our great, county parks or city parks that you can walk around and just be outside and not take that for granted. So teas, herbal baths, and taking walks. Those are a few of my favorite free and easy things to do. Once again, ladies and gents and people watching, I don't have any short answers, as you can see.
I love it. I love it. And I think of these times, especially like tomorrow and people going to the stores and wanting to like set up their home and doing all these things for like others, right? Nothing bad
Yeah.
with that. I'm
Yeah.
just saying, I think there's a lot of that external, like, okay, what am I going to cook for others? What am I going to do for others?
That's
It's
right.
so nice that you're giving us those things to like take care of yourself, right? And I think of like when you're in the airplane and they say, put the mask on
Oh,
yourself
yeah.
before you help your children or anybody else. I love the fact that you're giving us, those things that are going to put that mask and give us that oxygen and life back that we need in order to continue to do, right? It doesn't mean we'll never cook a dinner for anybody else or we'll never invite people in our home, but it's nice to just come in, and I think out of the pandemic of anything, I try to focus on the positives. Like that was something positive that it took time for us to like be with ourselves, with our families. But after so long, it's like, okay, thank you. How much longer can I be here with myself? And then I have a question for you. I know you mentioned you have peppermint. I looked it up, by the way, peppermint.
So it's peppermint. Okay.
Hierba buena in your home, and you're able to go and harvest that. What does harvesting mean? Do you just grab it, like or if I
Yeah.
see it outside and I'm walking, do I just take some, or
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
did your grandparents or ancestors
Yeah,
teach
what's
you
the
how to
tradition
gather
with that? So the tradition, right, is to when you take, you've got to put back in or put something first, So it can be as simple as every time I go and harvest, these plants from our backyard, literally harvesting them means I'm pulling them from the plant, pulling them apart. But also before I do that, I'm usually putting down some water, making an offering of water. And that sounds like common sense. Like, of course you should water your plants, but it's doing it with intention of saying, I thank you, little plant, for giving me of your life matter. And, putting down a little bit of water, or maybe you're putting down a little bit of tobacco, or maybe you have some rosemary that you've been drying and you put that back in, because it's just completing that cycle of making sure that we don't just take. And that's why these plants, they're really happy. I know all the plant people, will agree with me, right? That the plants get really happy with attention and pruning, and maybe that's what I'm doing too. When I harvest, I'm also looking at, oh, okay, maybe I need to prune over here a little bit, kind of cut this area. This is a dead part already, so let me take that away. It's crowded in here. Let me make room. So that's also really important to give back, and I think that's important to bring up, especially during this time we've just gone through as a planet. This thing called the COP26, where all these countries got together to talk about the climate, right? And how important it is to take care of this planet. And sometimes when I listen to those conversations, I think, man, what can I possibly do? Like, I'm one person with my family, but I know that I can do different things. Like, for example, can you plant plants that attract butterflies and attract hummingbirds, right? And that attract, um, did I say butterflies, hummingbirds, and bees, right? We've heard that you hear these reports like bees are incredibly important to our ecosystem. So I say to you and to myself and to others, pick that one thing that you can do. Maybe what you can do is to plant something. Plant something in your yard, or on you only have a balcony, or you only have just your front living room. Maybe you don't have space of your own, and get a small planter and do something like that. Or maybe make use of these public parks that we have, and show ourselves and show others. Like, sometimes our community, especially, I only speak within our own community, like, we'll go to different parks sometimes and we'll be the only Mexica family, the only Latinx family, the only Latino family there. And it's important that we get ourselves out there and see ourselves in these spaces. So yes, absolutely, our indigenous knowledge that belongs to us, our indigenous culture communities, it's real, it's not made up, it's been passed down generation to generation. And so I think that the piece around giving back, it can be in many different ways. Like, don't feel like you don't have anything that you can give. It can be very simply walking in public forests, going to Alum Rock, which takes an effort, right? You might need to, if you don't have a car, it might be a little bit hard to get there. So maybe you're just, going to the local park. Anyways, now I'm going in circles.
Oh, I
Sorry.
love it. I
Going
love
in
it.
circles in my
Reminder.
mental
Sometimes
park.
we have to hear it a couple of times where it's like, oh, I can go to the park. That's right.
Yeah,
Alum Rock. I can, walk, take a
yeah,
longer walk that day. And I'm thinking you mentioned, you take your family, right? And
yeah.
so what other things as a family, I love the park, as a community, what kinds of things as a community do you engage in
Yeah,
that help you maintain
yeah,
healthy?
yeah. So another thing that we do as a family is that we are traditional Mexica Aztec dancers with Calpuli Tonaleque Aztec dance, and Tonaleque means warriors who accompany the sun. And so we gather every week on Wednesdays at the Mexican Heritage Plaza, our home, if you will, home for a lot of us. And we gather together, and it's a number of things. One, you move, right? You're moving your body. It's dance. It's not an inactive way of being. It's active. We go together. Sometimes our kids feel like participating fully. Sometimes they just want to watch, and sometimes they want to do a little bit, maybe, working with the plants that we bring every week. But the point is that we come together, and obviously that was very difficult when we couldn't come together, and we were coming together, via Zoom. But it's been something that has been the through line for us. That what's constant, what's kept us strong, is knowing who we are. And during the pandemic, that actually got tested, right? It tests you, like, wait a minute, this is unlike anything we've ever experienced. And our community was tested, and our community was there for us. So you're all part of your own communities. You might be very active in your church. You might be very active at the school where your children go, or maybe you're very active at the college that you go to, or on your block, right? My block is very active. So as a family, what we did and do was, when we couldn't gather, we went into our yard and practiced our traditional Aztec dances in the yard. And our neighbors who know us and they know we're dancers were cool with it. Shout out to my neighbors who are awesome. So that's something that we did. We said, again, we don't need to stop. We can continue, and even if we have to practice inside the house, right? Because we also have been in the pandemic for quite some time. So those are some of the things that we are doing, and now we're in this place of being carefully together, of now being able to have public gatherings carefully, right? Asking people to make sure to wear their masks, is still, because we want to take care of each other, and it's doing that as much as possible. So, for example, tomorrow we'll have a sunrise ceremony for the 10th year in a row, at the Mexican Heritage Plaza. There you go. There'll be the 10th annual on Thanksgiving sunrise ceremony. Doors open at 4:30, but the program doesn't start until 5 a.m. This is, and again, remember, different parts of the community celebrate differently or don't celebrate. So for many of us in our Native communities and in solidarity with the Native communities in the United States, Thanksgiving is not a day that we celebrate. It's a day of mourning, a day of reflection, a day to gather, absolutely, and practice community unity, as this flyer says, where we'll have guest speakers and have the chairwoman and chairwoman of the Moak Maloney and the chairman of the Amamutsan, two of the local Native peoples here. And so this is something that we do in solidarity. And also it's a form of self-care, right? Because for many of us, we don't celebrate the mainstream commercial story of Thanksgiving. And this stream is not about what is the true story of Thanksgiving. So if people want information about that, you can certainly go to great websites like, for example, actually today, the Metroactive online, they put up a great article about the 10th annual sunrise ceremony, and people can learn from that. Or you can go to, like, for example, a website called Indian Country Today, and that's online. For example, there's another one that I can drop in the chat somewhere. It's about it's titled "For Native Peoples, Thanksgiving Isn't a Celebration, It's a National Day of Mourning," and you can listen to it too. It's pretty accessible. So again, this goes back to, for many of us, redefining self-care is also considering what are some of the things that we participate in that we don't wish to participate in anymore. So for our family, we actually don't participate in any Thanksgiving festivities. If you do, absolutely, that's your choice. But as a form of self-care for us, because we have taken the time to learn what Thanksgiving means to the Native people of this land, and especially the Wampanoag people on the East Coast, we do not choose to celebrate, but we choose to be in community. So anyways, that's enough about that. And I think that you can check that out. And we should be online tomorrow. Remember, this is 100% volunteer. So for sure it's live in person, and I'm sure we'll get somebody's phone and put it on Facebook Live.
And the only thing I think, in addition to, like, what does that have to do with what we're talking today?
Yeah.
I think of growing up, and family, friends, and really taking this day to, like, this is when we sit and pray, and everybody gets to go around the table and say what they're thankful for, right? Which there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely beautiful. And I think
but it's also the source of a lot of stress.
Yes, it can be.
A lot of people really get stressed out about flying, people flying all over the country to be with family for a few days, and
hurry up,
do we have this? And I just drove by on my way back from picking up my kids from school, drove by the Safeway. The parking lot was full, and I was like, yep, I'm not participating. Haven't been participating in that for a long time. Mm-hmm. And it's not to say it like, oh, I feel like I'm better than others, so much as in a form of individual self-care and community care, family self-care, we have removed ourselves from that entirely. we don't participate in that. And that's a form of self-care, which is, I don't want to be stressed out. I want to have the opportunity to reflect on the day and to build solidarity with other Native peoples. So it's not like I'm not just gonna, sit in bed either. In fact, I'm getting up really early.
We
But
are.
and if
And then with that too is like
yeah,
I think of self-care too, and then focusing on the positives, right? Like
absolutely.
being grateful. And so
Yeah. But also,
something
and if
that
people do get a lot of joy and all of that out of celebrating, Thanksgiving, which is not a day of celebration for Native peoples,
no,
then, I'm not, this is not the forum to
no.
criticize that. And nor
Yeah.
would I criticize that. I would just ask you to take some time, to consider reading some of the work that different Native peoples have put out into the universe.
Mhm.
Um, about that. So again, self-care means different things for different people.
Yeah.
And I think during this time of the pandemic still being something that we can't ignore,
Mhm.
it's still very much present in our lives. Our children, ourselves, like we're just able now to get our vaccines for small children or for children under 12. What a deep sigh of relief, for our
Mhm.
family, and continue to protect ourselves. So
Mhm.
yeah, so for us, our family, the self-care is everything from working with natural plant life all the way to getting vaccinated.
Nice. And what do you recommend for somebody who's maybe really didn't grow up taking care of themselves or with that model and are like, you know what, I need to start taking care of myself? Are there any like simple things? You did mention walking, simple.
Mhm.
The herbs might take a little bit more of like,
Yeah,
where do I start? But they're also all around us, like you said.
yeah,
I'm sure that every person, walks by them, whether it's at the parking lot at work or at the store. You'd be surprised.
you'd be
But
surprised.
somebody who's just like, I just want to start with the basic. How can I shift my brain from being in such a maybe negative space, or the times we all go through them. We all go through dark times. I don't think there's any perfect person that I've met so far.
Mhm.
We all go through something at some point in our lives. So like to take us out of that, like to be in a more healthy space, and
Yeah,
well,
yeah. I think one of the things that I've been that's really easy to do on the surface and take some discipline is first thing in the morning. And this is something I'm doing myself, so I'm not making recommendations that I'm not trying to force myself to do. Is, for example, first thing in the morning, not reaching for your phone. Like it's everybody reaches for the phone right away, right? So you reach for the phone and immediately like you're dragged into, maybe what's happening on social media or like getting the news and or maybe you're checking emails or you're checking text messages. So what I've been actively doing for the last several months, and I'm not saying I'm 100% perfect on this. Some mornings I do, reach for my phone and there's something in particular that I need to do, right? Like I'm like, oh, okay, did that message come in or what, what's happening? It's a go time at work. Um, so the first thing I would recommend as an act of self-care, and it's not selfish, is to wake up and not check your phone, just to try the first 15 minutes of being awake and to practice gratitude and saying, okay, I'm grateful for this day. I'm waking up, I'm breathing, I'm doing well, right? I'm going to get up, I'm going to drink some water, right? I'm going to actually move around, maybe do a couple stretches, maybe just think in another room. Because sometimes in the morning, it's like 6 o'clock in the morning, you're like waking up and you're like, oh man, okay, here we go. So I'm thinking about my mindset, right? Instead of thinking like, okay, here we go, another day, right? A lot of people didn't get to see another day, right? And for different, I was just at a funeral the other day and somebody was a victim of a drunk driver, a young person. And that person didn't get to wake up the next day and pick up the phone or not pick up the phone, give gratitude or not give gratitude. That choice was taken from them.
Mhm.
So every day, my general practice is to wake up. And as hard as it is, because as you know, I love communication and I love information. So I want to be in touch, right? And so, because you've sometimes gotten text messages from me at 7:30 in the morning. Good morning. And I want to send them at 7 or
Mhm.
earlier. But I also get to be mindful of other people's boundaries. And that's what I'm doing. That's a real simple way to just, I challenge all of us, continuously challenge myself to not reach for the phone right away and to right away be like, oh my gosh. Because sometimes you see things that they might be triggers for you. They might be things that upset you,
Mhm.
that upset you more than you would have anticipated. And then you haven't even gotten out of bed and you're already worked up.
Mhm.
So,
You mentioned the text you sent to me, and I think that brings me to another point. Sometimes when we are going through, whether it's uh, substance use, or addicted to even our cell phones, or I mean, just these addictions, right?
that's
And they
right.
can come in different forms, food or um,
Every
I
kind.
think it's important to acknowledge, right, that sometimes we feel like, oh, I could do it on my own, right? Like whether it's, maybe eating and like donuts and like, sometimes calling a friend and saying, hey, I can't do this. I'm going to go stop, and then seeking support,
That's
or,
right.
drinking. And I know these holidays, I know in my family, at least, it's that was a time to bring in the 12 packs, and, one beer turns into 10 beers. And then, unfortunately, not too many good things, come out of
Right, right, to
over,
say moderation instead of
yeah,
like, "Oh, I'm gonna
exactly.
actually, I deserve this.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the holidays, I worked hard, I'm gonna have, like, that
The
6th
one turns
beer."
into 12. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, really understanding that, like, and especially as you get older, your body reacts to all those things, like, when you now when you go to Starbucks and you see, like, one thing is seeing, like, these, little kids, not little kids, but kids who get like, "Oh, let me get this frappuccino with, like, all the caramel and all the stuff," and, I'm 48 years old, and I know in our community, diabetes is a thing, so I'm like, "Wow, that looks good." And then I say, "I'll have an iced coffee. No más. That's it. Iced coffee. Ice and coffee. No extra sweetener, no fun, no nothing." But I'm taking care of myself. So sometimes self-care, it feels good, it smells good, and sometimes it's just being disciplined and just being like, iced coffee, or in the morning,
Mhm.
let me get up and not pick up my phone.
Yeah. And then the only thing I'll add is like reaching out for support sometimes
Oh,
when
yeah,
you
yeah. Let's
can't
talk
do it
about
on
that.
your
Yeah.
own, right? Like, you mentioned, for example, this young lady who lost her life due to a drunk driver, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, some of us have to hit rock bottom before getting that help or calling that number. But don't be scared to reach out for that help. I provided a lot of those phone numbers early on. You can always, replay this video and get those and pause them and write them down, because you just never know. And we all need them at one time or another. I know for sure Tamara and I have seen a therapist here and there because of
That's
issues
right.
that we just, no tea could handle at the time, even though
That's right.
teas are great, but, sometimes they're a little beyond, those things. And so it's
Yeah.
okay to seek for support when you need it.
Oh my gosh, I think that, one, culturally, every culture has some sort of system of support, right? And in our community, in my community, our community, we have like the comadres and the compadres, which originate, there's both an indigenous practice of that and what a lot of people in different forms of religion have, like the godparents and that kind of thing. Um, so when you have, that best friend or that auntie that is like the young auntie that keeps up with you and all that, and reaching out and saying, "Hey, do you have 5 minutes? I just need to vent." And also being really specific with people. I need you to hear me out. I don't want you to try to resolve my issues. I just need somebody to hear me. And that really helps. Like if somebody, if my co-mothers, my besties say, "Hey, I need you to listen." Okay, I'm ready to listen. And then you can always ask, do you want recommendations? And then sometimes things are very complex and things are like the pandemic, right? It's everything from your health, your well-being, the rent, food, education, living in the Bay Area. That's a lot. It's a lot of stress. And so sometimes saying, maybe I need professional help. And yeah, absolutely. We have definitely sought out professional help and therapists. I have for myself as an individual, another form of self care, and also to support our family. And I know that it's hard. It's hard to get for free. That's really tough. So there may be other resources. I'm not sure, that the county has resources available for that, but I know a lot of different nonprofits do. But yeah, I'm a proponent of that. And sometimes people don't want to talk about that, like, oh, therapy, that's, like, you're crazy. Like, then you're definitely like admitting that something's wrong with you. But come on, if we haven't learned anything in the pandemic, is that the sooner you admit that, yeah, you need help, the sooner you can get support and move on and be in a good way for your family structure, whatever your family structure is. Maybe your family structure is that it's you and your grandfather and a cousin, or maybe it's you and your roommates. It doesn't necessarily have to be some sort of, what's considered quote unquote traditional. And especially in the Bay Area, like, we have all different kinds of forms of family. So I think that's really important. There's chosen family too.
Mhm. Yeah.
Anyways, the point is that therapy is a good thing. And
Thank
if you can access it, I highly recommend it.
Yes, and you can. And I mentioned the phone numbers of behavioral health.
Oh, cool.
We're going to try to see if we can get it back up here, but otherwise you can go back to this video, rewind when I go over those phone numbers. It's one of the 800 numbers on there. The Santa Clara County has a behavioral health that at least, they can assess you and then,
Okay.
if it's a need. So yes, absolutely. That's what we're here for. Thank you so much for all that. I'm going to give some time for any questions, any of the audience members that logged on today. Thank you so much. I know we're tired of mandates and lockdowns. Believe me, I think we all are. And it's time to really, come together and do it in a healthy way. Remember, tomorrow, those of you that might be gathering with community for one reason or another, be safe. Make sure you're outdoors. If you can, wear your face masks. Get vaccinated if you haven't yet. There's many reasons, as I mentioned earlier, why you should. And those that have gone through COVID, I haven't think creator. I'm blessed every day, and I have my vaccine and I have my booster now. But I know it's no fun, And when I talk to them, and they can't even hold a conversation over the phone, because the breathing is not allowing them. It's hard. So thank you all so much. If you have any questions regarding today's topic, please put it on here. Anything that you want to ask our wonderful guest here today. Definitely, if you remember anything, is take care of yourself, as simple as water and a walk, and breathing the fresh herbs around us and having teas here and there, to asking for help when you need it. Sometimes you just need the help. Yes, comadres, of course, reaching out to your besties, your best friends, those people that you can trust. Sometimes, life is hard. And it's okay to reach outside of your just intimate circle. I know some of us grew up to, oh, don't tell anybody, keep your problems behind closed doors. And
That's
that
right.
in and of itself is stressful, especially when you're young. So those of you that, have young ones, those of us that have young ones too, knowing that they might not want to share everything with you as a parent, that they may need those aunties,
Mhm.
uncles to connect with. And that's okay. It doesn't mean they don't love you. It means that they need to ask for help, and we get to be that support for them. So any questions? I'm looking out here. And
We
if I
just have
don't,
comments, and yeah, it's definitely one thing I didn't bring up was, if at all possible, doing some form of support of others. It can be formal, like volunteering. Maybe you're volunteering at Vegilution or at Sacred Heart, or maybe you're volunteering by saying, hey, you know what? I know there's an older couple, down the street, or in the apartment next, two doors down, and just maybe taking them a plate of food, or maybe you have some extra, dried goods, rice and beans, and just taking them a little bag, with something just to say, I'm thinking of you. And I think that really matters. especially now that in modern, we've been in modern times for a long time. But what I'm getting at is that, especially for a lot of us that have been in migration for a long time, my parents came from Mexico, migrated away. Then I left Southern California 20 plus years ago. So when I see, elders across the street, I'm also thinking, I'm thinking of my mom, and I'm thinking about the people who dropped off food for her. So I'm paying it back. And that's a form of self-care, but it's also taking care of others. Taking care of others, it's not, you just need to do it just to do it for its own intrinsic value. But at the same time, it's building community. That's really important.
Thank you. So I have a couple, let's say I have a question now, but I'm going to go through here. As I mentioned, Christy Marie, tired of mandates, lockdowns. We have Paula Rest Henry, who's not tired of it, and she's tired of losing people she loves. Fought too hard to be cancer. She's not letting mask mandates upset her. We have Ofelia Medina. Thank you for keeping us informed and for connecting us to these important resources and opportunities. Together, we will overcome this. Teresa Castellanos, Indigenous Knowledge. Adan Hernandez got the booster yesterday at the fairgrounds. Awesome. Mike Brown, still America, still free. There's plenty of precedent for sacrifice for the public good. Lockdown is long gone. True. Having to wear a mask in certain situations for a little while is hardly a sacrifice. Having to get vaccinated is hardly a sacrifice. The Supreme Court has allowed it for over 100 years. We have Anya Artigas. Thank you for being a proponent of asking for what you need. Therapy is cathartic and imperative to staying well during this time, especially. Who do we have here? A special guest appearance. Yay! Hi. Your name?
Your name, sir?
I'm Kiawi.
Kiawi.
Very good.
Yeah, I'm just
Welcome.
FaceTime my friend right now.
You're going to FaceTime your cousin right now? Very good self-care.
Connecting with your family. Good to see you, Ahijado. Oscar Lopez, Gomes, and we have a question here from Teresa Castellanos. How do we expand this conversation beyond individuals? Any thoughts on that?
How do we expand the conversation beyond individuals? Oh, definitely. I'm thinking about the community care, right? Community, as I'm taking it, hello, Anya, hello, everyone. Expanding that beyond the individual, absolutely, that's a good question. And I think these are things like, for example, like the sunrise ceremony. That's a great example of being in community. That's when we're practicing self-care as a community, right? Or for example, there's so many different New Year celebrations that happen in San Jose because we are a very diverse community, thankfully, right? So for example, there's Tet, there's Mexican New Year, there's all kinds of seasonal Chinese New Year. So there's all these moments of culture, reflection, opportunity to start over again that are rooted in culture. I always go to culture first because that's my go-to. And then another piece might be also being active in, say, for example, let's say you have a niece or a nephew or a child that's in a school, being active in that school, right? Thinking beyond myself and my child and my niece and nephew, but really thinking like, what can I do to help support that school? That's every single school is like a little community center, right? Those of us that access these schools need a lot from them. Sometimes we need, access to social services, right? Or we need access to support for our children, clothing. I mean, all these school districts have been doing so much work, especially during the pandemic, to take care of us. So that's kind of how I take that question, is to say, one, how can we as individuals think beyond what's happening to me, to myself, and to my family, but also thinking what happens to other families and other people in my community does impact me, right? Because if my block, for example, we're very active, we're always talking to each other, checking in, especially during the pandemic. And that actually makes us all feel good, and it makes us all feel less isolated. So we all feel better, right? And we feel better able to say, hey, I need some help with this particular thing. Can you help me? Instead of just being like, I've lived here on this block for 16 years and I'm not going to ask my neighbor for help because I've never spoken to them. Anyways,
Thank you.
I don't know if that answers your question, but
And I think the only thing I'll add is I think this is a good example of taking it beyond our individual selves,
Oh.
right? Is being transparent,
oh my gosh, yes.
vulnerable, live, where you can share this video with others. It'll be on YouTube. And, Tamara put herself out there, like, this is what I do, and it's okay to ask for support and not keep it to yourself and say, shh, don't tell anybody, let's pretend we're perfect, because nobody's perfect. And I'll mention it again, right? And even though social media, like, sometimes makes us believe, like, wow, they're so perfect, or I want to be, nobody's perfect. And even the person that seems the most perfect is probably the one either working the hardest or getting the most support out there, and, working with the therapist sometimes, or you'll be surprised. And so we're at the end of our conversation here. Thank you so much for joining us, Tamara, for being our guest.
Always.
Comadre,
Thank you for
friend,
having me.
all of the above. Thank you for all the work you do in our communities to make them healthier as well, not just also, but first and foremost, yourself. Any closing remarks, any closing thoughts with our community here today?
Yeah, I would just ask each one of you to just take some time to think about what does it look like during these times and moving forward. I think one of the lessons is that we are capable of slowing down and doing less, and still having a very fulfilling life. And I think also the piece around if you have a lot of something, then to share it, and to not wait for somebody, well, what if they think I'm weird, or what if they don't need this? Hey, during the pandemic, my neighbors, we were dropping stuff off on each other's doors. Whether we needed it or not, that's not what mattered. What mattered was that we were not alone. Y como decimos en español, you're not alone. No están solos. No están solas. Please reach out. And if you're having a hard time, reach out. And so I thank you, and I thank the county for reaching out. I'm still like, wow, somebody came to my door. So that's so cool.
Nice.
So thank you, and all the other emergency operations center people.
Nice. Thank you so much. Thank you all for tuning in. And we do have a conversation similar in Spanish at 4:00. So tune in if you have any family members that you think, oh, they might benefit from a conversation or listening in. Please let them know. Thank you again, Tamara Mosawani, comadre, friend, community member, leader in our community, for being here today, taking time out of your day, busy day, and for also creating the space that you mentioned for tomorrow, the sunrise ceremony. Those of you who are able to join, whether it's in person or live virtually, I think she mentioned she'll put the information there in the comments. So if you can just maybe put in the link if you have it available in the comments, so folks can log on virtually from bed, maybe their phone, even though, and then put it away after. But yes, thank you for creating that space. And thank you again to Patricia for working the magic in the background. And hope you all have a great, safe holiday break. And we'll see you here in 2 weeks in conversation with the county. Thank you again, and take care. Bye.